this image actually that you see is not exactly the System of a Down. Always when I lecture about Armenia, I start from far, from history, from the old culture, from far beyond Soviet times and genocide times, the roots of Armenian music. And it would certainly be interesting for somebody who is expert in the technical aspect of music to interpret the musical aspect of System of a Down related to Armenian rhythms and melodies and so on. But I'm more interested in the words. And usually when I lecture about the genocide, I concentrate on what was lost. How did it happen, the destruction? That's maybe not the point. To understand what did disappear. It shows the actual weight of the genocide in a very thrilling way. All of these monasteries and the pilgrim practices connected with them, how people went to these monasteries and prayed and encountered the relics and had Surb Batarak, and then 2 or 3 days of dancing in the courtyard of monastery, learning new songs from people from other villages and all this way of life. I discuss about this in my newest book that appeared just a few days ago. And so when in my book, when I started to portray the philosophy of genocide in the Armenian context, I located the first writing in the West by an Armenian, where she's describing that how does it feel to be an Armenian, in this case in America. And this woman, Yerenian, wrote a small essay as an answer to the question of his friend. An innocent question: how does it feel to be an Armenian in America? And she started to describe her feelings. Actually, in the very beginning, she was already doubting that whether her friend will actually even read what she writes or not. So this kind of mistrust and pessimism was the first thing that appears in her writing. And you can see what she writes. Being an Armenian immediately after the genocide gives one strange feelings. Mind is torn by the conflict, by opposing emotions growing out of my racial inheritance and my living experience. And here you can see in red and green these two sides, positive and negative. There is courage, optimism, and so on, but there is also fear, pain, worry, depression, sorrow, despair, death. And the American audience, American people, they were able to understand only the green side of the thing. And this creates this kind of imbalance. The Armenian lives in two worlds. Yerenian depicts how the Armenian story of lifelong suffering consists of our murdered manhood, our outraged womanhood, our trying babies, tortured mothers, crucified leaders. Then she describes how Armenians cry in anguish and pain, showing our wounds, asking for help, as in a shipwreck on the sea. Then, finally, she writes, "The crowd on the shore threw out some handfuls of pennies which fall to the waters. Our cry was not understood." She's not wondering at Turks who committed the destruction, but at the Westerners. What has happened to them, to us? She writes, "They are unresponsive. They seem almost motionless." So what we have here is the lack of understanding, the gap between the two worlds, Armenian and American. Armenians live in their world of suffering, and the others live in the ordinary world. And there is no real connection between these two worlds that the Armenians must change all the time, back and forth. I really appreciate this piece of writing by Yevgenian. It's very strong, almost prophetic, and most probably she did not grasp the depth of everything that she was saying. What does it mean? And now we come to the philosophy. The way how we portrayed the situation, what does it signify? What is the ontological meaning? The question of being, the character of being. After the genocide, Armenians' way of being is different. Essence of their existence is different. They have proceeded to a new kind of state of being. The genocide and its aftermath have renewed, in negative terms, the Armenian soul and their way of being, and the result is a new form of existence, post-genocide being. And this, of course, applies most of all those who were survivors themselves and their descendants in the West, and of course also here. So Yevgenian describes how the Armenians went through suffering. The Armenians told about their martyrs, spoke for truth, honesty and justice, but no avail. The world does not make a slight movement until finally there is a movement. What is that? The world turns it back and saying, "Get out, you are breaking my heart." So the point is that the Armenians went through something that the other people cannot even stand listening to. And this makes post-genocide man to be in doubt of traditional, trustworthy virtues, such as sincerity. Is there really, behind everything, just injustice? Is the whole world a big deceit or a hoax? Meaning, if a whole nation can be killed like that, what then can not happen in this world? Anything can happen. Is there a point in everything, anything? Is there any goodness anywhere? So these traditional ethical concepts are set into a new light after the destruction of a nation. So before 1915, if there were massacres or local persecutions, the Armenians were proud to die without fear, but now life itself turned to a nightmare. America, according to Yevgenian, is so joyous country that it is impossible to deliver any dark shades of Armenian life to it. Life in America, of course, is good, but it's another kind of life. Yevgenian herself has freedom, position, friends, but none of these can touch her actual inner nightmare. She has no smile of Americans. She writes, "I walk about like in a dream. My head is heavy, my throat is choking, my spirit is crushed." Inwardly, she is struggling with the pressure of images of villages being massacred, girls taken to harems, exhausted children, churches being demolished, and all of these, all the time, completely irrelevant for American way of life. And this is significant philosophically. We have these two lives, the normal life, and then this post-genocide life, which is more real, and the ordinary life feels to be something less real than the inner nightmare that the survivors are struggling with. And in this way, the whole reality is seen in a different way in relation to the genocide. And the last quotation from her. She describes how these two lives go hand in hand. The American dream and Armenian nightmare. She describes how the happy crowds are marching up and down in American street, but to her it brings into mind women and children marching up and down the plains of Armenia in search of food. I attend a dinner party. I note the luxurious gowns and wasted food, and I'm forced to think of the rags in which those once wealthy and beautiful women of my land are now clad. So physically, she's seeing the American reality, but with her inner eyes, she's experiencing the world through the genocide experience. American children playing happily brings into her mind orphanages with their pale babies and so on. And in this way, down there, the bright side of every situation points out to me the other side, the darker side, the Armenian side. And in this way, this post-genocide Armenian way of viewing the world is constituted by the sense that all things are not as they should be. Everything is wrong, basically. And this becomes as the basis of whole existence. So this is how the philosophy of genocide in the Armenian context in America started from. And now we will skip almost 100 years of this discussion and find our way from these times to actual topic of our day. Philosophy of genocide in system of a Down. You know very well that historians and politicians were writing about the genocide for decades, writing hundreds of books that very few people actually read. And the big audience never knew anything about the whole Armenian question. And up to our times, I've experienced many times in Finland when I say that I'm going to Armenia, Romania. I said, no, Armenia. Armenia, yeah, that's the language of Christ. I said, no, it's Aramaic. And yeah, but after Kim Kardashian's visit, I think this problem will be solved. Yeah, it's amazing how things change in the modern world. Yeah, politicians and historians fulfill their own function, but they never can reach the hearts of the crowds. We need Kim Kardashians. But actually, System of a Down was the first one who really brought the topic into wide consciousness of Western people. And they've done so much. All the interviews, let's say a little bit longer interviews, they always, this topic appears. And they made this film, The Screamers, and the young generation, the rock people, those who very seldom read monographs written by historians, they listen and appreciate what they say. So personally, I consider them as the most important voices of the Armenian cause during this 100 years. And this whole thematic is of course present in their lyrics. However, they have only 2 or 3 explicit genocide songs that are obviously written directly about the genocide itself. And this is the first one, Luck. It's a song from their first album, 1998, a passionate, desperate, aggressive song by its music, and the same applies to the lyrics. The words are almost hypnotic. Elimination, elimination. Die, why, walk down, a whole race genocide. Basically, the most important thing in this song is that it was made 80 years after the genocide, but as a phenomenon there was something new in it. You know that the Jews, after their Holocaust, have been written hundreds and thousands of books, and the world also has a big number of Jewish rock stars like Mark Bolan and Kiss and Bob Dylan even, but they didn't write songs about Holocaust. So here we have a very straightforward, shameless, offensive song full of power, and the matter was brought out after decades of silence and humbleness, and it's like you have pressure of 80 years and then it bubbles up with this song, which is like an explosion. Text is very simple, maybe not the best song of System of a Down, but it shows very well the inclination of Tankian and Malakian, who write these songs, how they are able to condense deep meanings into single words, like die, why, walk down. These words are used like banners to symbolize wider meanings and depths. And this kind of way of using symbols fits well and is very proper for the genocidal issues, because it's always problematic in both philosophical and aesthetical terms to write anything about genocide, how to describe it. The essence of genocide is indescribable in itself, and the details often are unbelievable. So that's why such singular words are able to function so that they express wider meanings, as if exploding really the meaning. And here these banner words show the despair after the whole destruction and its denial. The second and much more beautiful song explicitly about the genocide is called Holy Mountains, from the album Hypnotize. And this song is a beautiful series of painful flashes, like flashbacks from the holy mountains that are lost but not forgotten, and from the moments of irrational killing. In an Armenian way, the tune of the song is very melodic and touching, like piercing your heart, And then we have this heavy metallic background that enhances the impression of the nightmare beneath the calm surface. This song paints a very sublime yet irrational desire for freedom, but it's also blowing out anger and rage. Technically, as a poem, this text is rather open, like modern poetry is. We have this kind of banner words that appear just like in a dream, leaving space for different ways to understand and experiencing the text. And of course it's possible to listen to this without even knowing and understanding anything about the genocide even. Do you know their haunting presence, is the question. So the question is not about the actual events of the genocide. It would be maybe too simple to make high-class art by just describing what happened, but here we have a philosophical approach to the matter. This question is a poetical way to ask about those things that already Yegenian was writing just after the genocide. Do you know how does it feel to live in the shadow of genocide? Do you know how does it feel to live in the shadow of constant denial? Do you understand how this post-genocide existence is like? The song arises from the sense of anguish emanating from the fact that the sense of genocide is present and it does not fade away. So these two songs are like easy cases because they explicitly portray the genocide issue. But the rule is that more often these same realities and these same shadows are present indirectly and even implicitly. And this is why it's certainly possible that one may listen through all of their albums without understanding where do their lyrics rise from, and many have done so. For example, we have this song Soldier Side, another extremely beautiful song. It functions as a description of the pains of war, the event of leaving for war. It's like an anti-war song. But at the same time, the lyrics seem to portray something of the setting of genocide, but in somewhat open terms. The most interesting part is the last one. God is wearing black. He's gone so far to find no hope. He's never coming back. This actually approaches the ideas what the theologians have been writing about the genocide, like famous Armenian theologian in America, Vigen Guroyan, was writing about these same concepts from theological point of view. His conclusion was that whatever happened during the genocide for the suffering people, God was not in heaven, but he was present in them. And when these people were suffering, and actually it was body of Christ who was suffering in them. So like participation of God in these events. This is one way to try to explain these events from theological point of view, although it stresses then the weakness of Christian God. He can suffer with his people, but nothing more. Anyway, here we have the idea of sons of the mothers disappearing and God disappearing with them, expressed in a beautiful way. But from a philosophical point of view, the most interesting cases in the songs of System of a Down are those where you have no explicit reference to anything connected with genocide. And my favorite example is their most peaceful song, Such a Lonely Day. And it's mine, the most loneliest day in my life. And probably the most famous song of them also. It's the easiest of their songs. And a huge hit because of that. I remember it was playing in Finnish radio at that time, daily, many times. So how do people understand this kind of song? The first expression is that it's a rather usual piece of feeling about American life, perhaps like a lazy Sunday afternoon. And when the fans of this group were writing in forums discussing about this song, it seems that they mainly took it to refer to boredom and depressive moods. I'm bored, I'm depressive, so I feel like this. And so anyone can understand it easily that way. But if we think about those topics that we encountered in Yegenian's writings, for example, and approach the song from this post-genocide existence and its perspective, what can we find under this easy and calm surface? One can distinguish several even explicit themes that happen to be quite essential for the Armenian genocide. Going, dying, walking, and finally surviving. This is how the destruction happened in these death marches. Living together, dying together, while walking hand in hand. All details so central in the survivor memoirs. The main method of mass killings being the death marches. Dying on the road was a communal experience for the Armenians, walking together towards death, or in rare cases, survival. The song ends up with surviving and joy of surviving, but you see, it's no longer common joy, it's not our joy, it's not we survived, but it's only individual. My joy, I survived. The people is gone, communion is no longer there. The survivors are only separate individuals. So the main concept of the song, of course, is this day, which is being repeated on almost every line. What is this day? When in systematic theology we analyze holy texts, we don't look for the meanings from dictionaries, but we look for the meanings from the ways how the words are being used, from the context. The context describes how a word is being understood in a given work. So, if we analyze the features of this day, what does this song actually say about this day? Okay, obviously, the day is a lonely one. It's something that one must stand it alone, like Yerenia. Secondly, the day is one's own, meaning it belongs to me, in me. It belongs to the subject, it is in the subject, part of him or her. Thirdly, this day is strongly repulsive. The subject of the song does not yearn or miss it, is unbearable, in fact. There's something unbearable in it. And this is the fourth point of the day. It really represents something which is like a nightmare. Nightmare-like aspect of reality, something that should not exist, something that there should not be. And not only that, its existence should not be accepted, saying it should be banned. So then we can ask, what state of being would have such attributes? What could have an essence defined by such aspects? One can hardly imagine a more ultimate meaning for the idea and the concept of day in this song than the idea of the genocide as an abstraction projected into a concept of the day. Of course, day is a universal symbol for time, either as a certain moment or in a more abstract sense. So it's like a nightmare-like state that should not exist in the first place, and if it does exist, it should be opposed. One cannot stand it, but still it seems to define the personality of the subject. He's suffering because he cannot stand it, but he must suffer it in any case. So we could set the question from different direction. What else could fulfill such conditions? Could this really be about heartaches, or about Sunday boredom? At least we can say that the song is most effective when it's understood in relation to the genocidal experience. And now in this case, as always with art, it's not important what exactly Daron Malakian was thinking about when he was composing the song. Was he thinking about his girlfriend or anything? It's not an essential question when interpreting art. There is certain thematic that has risen into his mind to give an expression to a certain feeling, and behind that feeling, in any case, on some level, the heritage of genocide is present. So, in spite of all of her symbolism, Lonely Day does not portray or reflect the genocide as an event, but an imprecise flow of post-genocide state of being. The inner dimension of soul from which the songs and art emanate in general. Why else would an Armenian in America be inspired to sing about going and dying and finally surviving? Of course, the English language has a problem because you can be singular or plural, and probably most people understand this if you go as singular. But if we take this as a genocide song, then it's better to be read in plural. If you all go, I want to go with you. Yeah. Maybe we skip this for a while. There are so many works of art about the genocide in the diaspora Armenian art, but my personal favorite in the end in describing the essence of genocide is Daron Malakian's song Exploding, Reloading, which appeared on his solo album Scars on Broadway 2008. And this name, Scars on Broadway, is a good one. It has the same dualism as Yegenian's writing. We have the spotlights and we have the scars. It's like the American success and the post-genocide traumas. And this album is very deeply related to the genocide issues. This song, by its tune, is very desperate, bitter, hypnotic text that crystallizes everything that has been in the air for decades. But you cannot express the philosophy of genocide in 3 words better than Daron Malakian does here. I am genocide. And not only genocide is taken as the basis of identity, but the event is also equated with its denial. Malakian is not made only of the genocide, but also of its denial, the Turkish lies. I am genocide mixed with Turkish lies. The Turkish denial, too, is present everywhere, and there is no way to think about the subject without it. For me personally, there is no way to give interviews about Armenian genocide without being asked about the Turks and their denial and their arguments and so on. We are like doomed to have it there all the time. This text again is very simple by its structure, but very strong and expressive, a powerful crystallization. These lines are like an abstract expressionistic painting. I can put one here. Arsile Gorgis' Agony, also one way to express this post-genocide feeling by an American Armenian artist. And there's something expressionistic in the way how Daron Malakian is using words in his lyrics. Christ appears here in a bit wrinkled way, but in fact the result is a sharp crystallization of a big number of huge theological and philosophical problems. You know how our Armenian critics of religion have criticized the so-called mystical masochism by the church, who called people to remain weak and in fact led them to be slaughtered. And now this attitude here is presented in a surprising way by this eccentric rock star, and the message comes from within, and it's especially bittersweet attitude of ironic self-loathing. Jesus Christ is also involved in the genocide process. We cannot abstract religion out of the events and of the aftermath. And the song continues. You live on your knees, spread like a disease. How should we understand the lines? Who is doing what? Obviously, he is writing about the genocide, but again in an imprecise way, like out of inspiration, not describing some exact point. So one can read this from 2 perspectives. It could be understood as referring to Armenians or to the Turks. If we read this like from an Armenian-centered perspective, we can think that the Armenians lived in Turkey on their knees, subdued, and in the Turkish eyes they were spreading like a disease. And after the genocide, the Armenians again live subdued by the circumstances, begging on their knees for the pity of the world, that the world did not give, like Yegenian wrote, and they multiply where they do not belong to, in California. Or we can read the same lines thinking about the Turks, because in moral terms it is the Turks who live on their knees, subdued by their falsehood, yet multiplying in exponential numbers. Anyway, there's no story constituted by the lyrics. There is only a state of feelings in which the topics come forward and can be experienced in various ways. And in understanding art, I think it's important that such different perspectives, they are present inside each other. This applies to the singer and the songwriter as to those who listen to the music. And everybody understands it in a bit different way according to one's own background and associations. So the meaning of the lyrics is like an abstract collage of such schemes symbolized by single words and phrases. And this abstract expressionism as an art form is a good parallel to understand the way how the words function in poetical lyrics. For Daron Malakian, coexistence of joy and sorrow at the same time, it's very characteristic. In an interview, he himself has said that his most joyful songs tell about what? The most joyful songs tell about the saddest moments of his life. A good example of this is a song called Funny, which by its light melodic structure is a rather funny song. But the lyrics happen to be the darkest ever. One is turning red, let's join the dead. Funny. Funny. There were swastikas on Santa Monica, where they were scarred. Funny that no one said that you were dead and painted red, it should read. Okay, obviously the text is full of references to genocide. Red, the color of blood, ancient symbol of martyrdom, also in the Armenian church. So to paint someone red means to shed his blood. And the same expression was already in this song Holy Mountains, in which someone's mouth told to paint them all red. And if you think about the logic, how the things proceed in this song, it's like logic of dreams. You know, when we sleep in dreams, it's often the case is so that the dangerous things feel completely safe. Surrealistic things feel completely ordinary. And this is how it goes. The wide streets of sunny California, suddenly there are symbols of Nazism. Funny. It's a good way to show how the shadows of ancient nightmare are following one in the subconscious. Like in a dream, where odd things feel like something self-evident. Then, the talk about death paints you red. Then in the song, we suddenly find out that you, in fact, are dead already, painted red. You know that in dreams, the dead people appear to be alive often, and only later in the dream we realize that actually he's not alive, he's dead. And this is the same mechanism that functions in this song. And if we understand this in relation to the philosophy of genocide, it's like the death is following the Armenians, even in Santa Monica Boulevard. The stains do not cease to give the color to the souls. The random play of life and death seems to hit over the individuals like huge waves whose movements cannot be predicted. And in this kind of world, horror may feel nice, funny. Pleasure may cause sadness. Feeling high may make you cry. Just like Malakian referred in an interview to his inspiration, where the sadness and joyfulness appear at the same time. I have the last song here, and if we have really hardcore fans of System of a Down here, this one is very interesting because the last song is not published. This is something that Daron Malakian was playing in his concerts a few years ago, but it's not in his albums. Song called Hungry Ghost. Again, beautiful variation of the same moods. Here we are, lying in the side of a tomb, like in your mother's womb, written bare in blood that was red, following the book of the dead. And finally, all we are looking for is lives. Again, we have a deep vision of the victims. The singer identifies himself with the dead. The subject of the song, who is singing, is somewhere on a tomb site, not in the tomb. You know, the victims were never buried. And now there is a parallelism, lying in the tomb, being in the womb. I cannot resist the temptation of showing this picture, because, you know, in Eastern Christian tradition, tomb and womb are very often expressed in parallel terms: incarnation, death, resurrection. The church fathers, when they were writing about these subjects, they always were writing parallelisms between these two aspects. So, lying on the side of the tomb is being in front of life. In the womb, one is in front of a future life. Next to the grave, one is in front of lost life. In the case of genocide, this life did not come to an end, but was interrupted. And this is why this whole setup has turned upside down. So, in the womb, nudity is clean and something given, but in the grave, nudity is something written, that is based on a written command. We come to the same idea that was in the song Holy Mountains. Someone's mouth said, paint all them red. So the Armenians have been read by writing. Somebody wrote the command to make all of them red. And now in this song, this happens according to the Book of the Dead. You know, there is a Book of the Dead in Egyptian culture, and it happens that it is written in two colors, always, black and red. And the function of this book in an Egyptian culture was to help the dead soul in the other life to find their right place, to assist the deceased in his way to the other world. In these books of the dead, they are full of magic spells that the soul needed, and the most important thing that the soul needed in the other life was written in red in these Egyptian books of the dead. And there is, I don't know if Daron Malakian ever thought about this, or is this a chance, but anyway, there is a deep parallelism between the whole basic idea of Egyptian Book of the Dead and the use of colors in it, and the lyrics of this song. And the logic is that since there was no one to bury Armenians or to equip them to the afterlife, they must fulfill the function of the red text themselves. They must protect themselves. They have no one to give them the Book of the Dead and its red spells. So the question in the air in this song is, finally, the victims of the genocide were not able to protect themselves in this life. They were slaughtered. So, how do they succeed on the other side, after the death? What is their destiny beyond? In a way, this is the heaviest question one can ask after a genocide, but it has very seldom been asked by anyone. Of course, the Armenian Church is giving an answer to this on 23rd of April in Etchmiadzin. But Daron Malakian was the first one to express it in a so beautiful poetical way in a song that unfortunately is not published officially. So, in this song there are souls who need something important. The ghost of the song is hungry, needs food, and the verses end up with a desperate appeal. The souls are looking for lives, in plural. Only life, nothing else. It's like a petition made by the souls of the dead victims. They are yearning and looking for life. So the question behind this is, what did happen to the souls of those who died too early? Where are they now? Are they still wandering around the mountains of Armenia? And maybe I have used enough time and we have reached quite odd dimensions already. So there is always a danger that happened to one church father who was addressing too deep issues. They said that he was diving so deep that he never found back to the air again. So I think this is the last point that we can stop, and we still have some hope to get back where we came from, to this hall. So, thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for lasting here and standing all of this odd material. And thank you for the destiny and to the God that it happened during this special time when the boat of denial is sinking, as it read in the news today. Thank you.